right, well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And greetings to those who are in this building, and greetings to those who are on the outreach, because, of course, there's no delay for you. You're here right away. But I counted in my head when Bob was speaking, it was about 20 seconds before the YouTube caught up with what was actually being done and said here. So I think I've rambled enough that now the people on YouTube can see. And so greetings to you as well. If you're on the live stream, Shabbat Shalom to you. It's another wonderful day here in Irving, Texas, here with the Congregation of Yahweh Irving. And it's just a blessing to continue to stay with Yahweh's people. We're almost on time. I know it's about 3:01 before we started, but I don't think the brother on the live stream will mind. Usually during the break, we get started. We have songs, have a little praise report of things that go on throughout the week. We also do prayer requests. And so we ran about a minute or so over because we just discussed the prayer request with the brethren, and so I don't think you'll mind that. And you can do the same thing if you have a petition and you would like the other brethren to join in. You can always put it in the chat, or I know you can access the email through the site, or there's several ways in Facebook, and we would do that as well, and lift you up in prayer. And just like we're sharing with everyone here, we are family. This is the family of Yahweh. This is the body of Messiah, and we love one another. And speaking to that, I from the last message, when there was a comment, and Tony, I'll just say what we discussed here. Tony asked a question to Bob, and I like the way that it was handled. Bob was like, Tony, what's going on? Why you asked that? And then Tony was able to explain. And he went more detail in the break that didn't get on the live stream or recorded. And it's a real simple reason why. Bob had a message that he was delivering. He was speaking on something. And I'll tell you, if you were here during the middle of it, it opened up a real big discussion, a lot of questions. And now we have a lot more questions than we do answers. So we're going to definitely be looking into that. And so I'm glad they didn't get into that, because Bob would have never, he would have stopped right there. Yep. That discussion would have taken the whole rest of that time. But I will say this, that there was no anger, there was no misunderstanding. It was truly a question. And Bob followed up, like, what was that? And then Tony was able to flesh out his question. And we were able to have a very nice discussion and dialogue about it. And like I said, it generated more questions. So I will leave those messages up. I know Bob and David and Curtis and Dennis, they like talking about the prophecy and the kingdom and things like that. I don't so much. Not that I don't like talking about it, but that's their wheelhouse more so. Mine is I want to get there, definitely. I want to be
Let's focus on that first.
But they're kind of hitting me on that with the discussions, and they're kind of ready on those paths. So I imagine between those men and as they look into these things, I look forward to some very interesting messages and continued input from Tony. He's a very smart brother and in the Word, and I know the Spirit of Yahweh is with him. But having said all that, I also do want to say as well I said I would do this, but as we go out to acknowledge the brethren out there, especially those whether you're on live stream, on the outreach, and I know many do that, and I finally got some names. So to the Gregory family, Jane Gregory, and the Reynolds family, and the Del Pizzi family. I think it's John and Loretta, Wendy Romero, and Chris McElroy, and Eric Roche. I hope I said your last name right. Some of you I don't know, but guess what? Yahweh knows you. That's the key. And you know Yahweh, I know Yahweh, and so because of that, we're brothers and sisters in the faith and in this walk. And just want to send out greetings to you and your loved ones. Anytime you're watching or listening, and I'll get some more names. I know we're dispersed throughout. Some are here in Texas, but as you know, as Texans, we're proud of our state. So, they say it takes, 2 days to cross Texas. It's further from Dallas to El Paso than it is from the edge of Texas to California. We got all these everything's bigger here. So it's because you're from Texas doesn't mean you get to Irving in any small amount of time. So we're dispersed, and so and the brethren from different parts of the United States. So we send greetings to you. So having said all that, let's turn to Psalms 52. Psalms 52, and we're turning there for the only people that hadn't seen my title of those in this room. And so the title of today is Flourishing in Yah's House. And after we read this verse, I think you'll understand why I chose that name, or at least where that wording came from. And then we'll get into what I'd like to discuss here. And as always, if you have questions, by all means, and we'll get to them. And just like with Tony's, if it's one that requires a lot more in-depth discussion, I'm not deflecting, but if I know it's going to take us down a whole nother thing, I'll just say we'll kind of discuss it, and then we'll delve more into it later. Psalms 52, and of course the first verse is just talking about who's writing it now. So let's just pick up in the second part of verse 1, Psalms 52:1. It says, "Why do you boast yourself in evil, O hero or O man? The mercy of El is in all the day. Like a sharp razor, your tongue devises destruction and working deceit. You love evil more than good, lying more than to speak righteousness. You love all devouring words, O deceitful tongue. Yah will likewise break you forever. He will take you away, even pluck you from your tent, and uproot you out of the land of the living. And the righteous shall see and fear. Yes, they will laugh over him, saying, Behold, the man who did not set Yahweh as his strength, but he trusted in his many riches. He was strong in his destruction. But I am like an olive or an olive tree or a green olive tree in the house of Yahweh, and I trust in the mercy of Yahweh forever and ever." And I know in some translations, or it says, flourishing in his house forever. "And I will thank you forever because you have done it. And I will wait in your name, for it is good before your saints," waiting on Yahweh. And looking at that verse 8, I decided it's only 9 verses to read the whole thing, but looking at verse 8, when he's saying like that tree and an olive tree, not just any tree. And I thought about this, read this verse and had a few conversations this week. And the last time I spoke, I mentioned some of the characteristics of an olive tree, and afterwards, we had some discussions, and I was talking to my brother, Robert, he's here, and he was like, you may want to look into a little bit more about that, and I did, and I'll just tell you right now, it's still not exhaustive. I'm not going to have multiple topics. This is as far as I know right now, this is the last time I'll talk about this, but I'll just say this. There's a lot more verses when it talks about the olive tree and olives and what it is, and hopefully this will just prompt thought for all of us to continue to look into this and everything in the Word of Yahweh, and especially with some of the things that Bob read today that kind of marry up to what we'll read. Once again, I've told you about some of the aspects of the olive tree, that it's evergreen. It's got longevity. It lives a long life. It's prolific. It produces quite a bit. It's indestructible. And yes.
You gave that teaching. I took you at your admonition, looked into that. In the Romans, with Vespasian and Titus, they cut all those olive trees down in Jerusalem, burned them, and they'd come back.
And they still came back.
Isn't that something?
Right, because they are resistant, and you can't kill them. And I'll get to that in a minute. Even if you burn them, they'll grow back. They're fire resistant. They resist pestilence. They don't rot. Part of the discussion that I'm just jumping ahead of myself, but hey, we'll make it work. They don't rot. During the break, when one of the things we were talking about with Tony is 1 Corinthians 15, and remember it says sown in corruption and raised in incorruption. You thought about that. It talks about Yeshua, how he never saw corruption. He said, "You will not allow your servant to see corruption," in reference to Yeshua. That's why he said David, he saw corruption, but not Yeshua. And in that, and that's one of the things, the olive trees don't rot. They don't see corruption. And like Brother Tom pointed out, even if you try to burn them, it would damage it, but it comes back. Right. And so, and I thought what you were about to say with the Romans is that they made it illegal to cut it down. It's funny how they did that, but then later they made it illegal. It was against the law to cut down olive trees. Right. So I'll just kind of go through the list about, the longevity. They have some, they say, have been thousands of years that they know predate even Messiah that they found. And we know Yahweh is eternal now. In a lot of places, I'll just read one or two scriptures. Let's go to 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 1. We'll just read a couple of verses there. Because what I'm looking at is when you talk about this olive tree, and we want to be like Messiah, that and remember we read in Romans last time that it says that the root bears us, we don't bear the root. He's the tree by which we are the branches that extend from that, grow from him. And so looking at these characteristics that the olive tree has, that we can look at Messiah. So 1 Peter chapter 1, and I'm just going to read a couple of verses there, starting in verse 3. 1 Peter 1:3 says, "Blessed be Yahweh and Father of our Master Yahshua Messiah. He, according to his great mercy, having regenerated us to a living hope through the resurrection of Yahshua from the dead." And that's one of the things it does. Is not only do the tree live, but it regenerates. When he said it was burning, what happened is it burned, it'll sit for a while, and then its new shoots start growing. Generated, and it comes in Yahshua, once again, being that root for us, being that tree from which we grow. And to an inheritance, incorruptible. There's that word, incorruptible, and undefiled, and unfading. It doesn't go away. Having been kept in heaven for you. While you were kept by the power of Yahweh, being guarded through faith to a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. This is what it does. It's prolific, and if you don't know what that means, but it produces in abundance. And it produces many branches, it grows, it becomes big, and with that, one of my favorite verses, and we'll go to that first, Hebrews 2. I use it all the time. What did Yahshua do? It says that so that he would bring many more sons to Yahweh. So let's go there, Hebrews 2. I like reading that verse, but I'd rather read it than to quote it. And verse 9, let's start at Hebrews 2, verse 9 for context. Hebrews 2, verse 9. It said, "But we do see Yahshua, who humbled himself to become a little lower than the angels through his suffering and his death, but now is crowned with honor and esteem, so that he tasted death for the sake of everyone except Yahweh." It means everyone can come to salvation if we will believe and trust in him. "For it was fitting for him, because of whom are all things, and through whom are all things, having brought many sons to esteem," or to honor, "so that from the very beginning of their salvation they are made perfect through suffering." So it covers in that he can bring many sons. That's being prolific right there. From one, many can be saved. Through one, all who will believe in Yahweh or believe in his son Yahshua can come to Yahweh. It says, "For both the one sanctifying, the one being sanctified are all of one nature." And in fact, that was a wording that Bob used in his message, of one nature, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren. He wants to make them more like him. It says many, so that we can be like him. He would call us brothers, no longer servants, but brothers in him, children of Yahweh. Romans 8. Romans chapter 8. And keep with the same thing, Romans 8. And let's start in verse 12. Just to provide a little context, Romans 12. But the kind of highlight here is 14 through 18. But I want to start at Romans 12. It says, "So then, brothers, we are debtors not to the flesh to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the practice of the body, you will live. For as many are led by the Spirit of Yahweh, these are children of Yahweh." And we just read that in conjunction with what we read there in Romans 2. "For you did not receive a spirit of slavery, again to fear, but you received a spirit of sonship," or adoption, I think it says in some translations, "by which we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself witnesses with our spirit that we are children of Yahweh. And if children, also heirs, truly heirs of Yahweh, and joint heirs with Messiah, if indeed we suffer together, that we may also be magnified together, or esteemed together. For I calculate that the sufferings of the present age or the present time are not worthy to compare to the coming glory or majesty to be revealed to us. And I mean, that applies to now. I know we're talking about the olive tree and everything, but I will mention some other things. No matter what we're going through, no matter what we're looking at now, it's nothing compared to the reward we will see. Nothing. Not in comparison. Let's drop down to verse 28. It says, but we know, it was still Romans 8, verse 28, but we know that to the ones loving Yahweh, all things work together for good, to those being called according to his purpose. And he knew them in advance, and he sealed them with the likeness of the image of his son, that he might be the firstborn of many brethren. How do we become those brethren, these many brethren? And by whom he marked in advance, these he also called, and whom he called, these he also justified, and whom he justified, these he also magnified or glorified. Indestructible. And like I said, they don't decay. These olive trees, they don't decay. They're resistant to pestilence. If you burn it with fire, it still won't destroy it. It'll just damage it, but it comes back. It's something. It's resilient, self-sustaining. There's a term, I think it's a horticultural term, unparchable, which means you can't dry it out. So if you refuse to water it, or if there's no rain, it still grows. It still lives. See, because remember, we're not the root. Remember, that's what we were told. I'm talking about the root. We are the branch, the leaves. We're talking about us being grafted in, so that base, that structure, the foundation of this tree. And only the tree, I think, that does it, I think they say, are eucalyptus trees, but it doesn't need to be watered. It doesn't need to be watered, but it can draw from the ground what it needs. It feeds and sustains itself, and by virtue, everything attached to it, the branches and leaves. Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you I understand who Yahweh is. But I guess what? Whoever he is, wherever he is, he sustains and keeps us. He's the source that feeds the branches, so to speak, through Yahshua Messiah. And he created a structure that kind of does the same thing that and Yahshua pointed to this olive tree so that we can understand it. They understood this. When he said that, the people at that time, the people that grew these, I don't have a doubt that they knew exactly what he was talking about. And as I was reading this, it just, like I said, it just builds my faith and my hope in understanding who it is that we are attached to. That's the key. And that's why we have to remember that we're not attached to, you know how we're attached to one another? Through the Messiah. We don't sustain one another. Once again, like that verse says, the root, it sustains us. Messiah sustains us. Yahweh sustains us through his son. And I cannot stress enough how important it is that when we come together, and that's why I'm fond of asking questions and things, so that we are provoked to righteousness, so that we will always dig down and understand what it is that we believe. What it is that we believe. What is it that we understand, so that we can remain attached to him, rooted in him. The generous, the large leaves produce an average of 400 pounds of olives annually. That's the average tree. Bigger trees produce more. Older trees produce more. You just think 400 pounds. Because olives aren't huge. They're not like apples or grapefruit. One tree. And so the thing is that it produces more in comparison to other trees. It produces more. And I thought about in that how with little, what Yahshua did, remember, with just a few loaves and fish, how he fed many. We read the verses ordered that by him, and was able to produce more brethren, more sons of Yahweh like him. That's what it does. It's healthy and it's used for food. I mean, the uses, when it says generous, the various uses, it can be used for food. We know that you don't have to turn there. There's several verses. I just picked one out of Nehemiah 9, which says 24. It says, and they captured fortified cities in the fertile land. They took possession of the houses filled with all kinds of good things, wells already dug, vineyards, olive groves, and fruit trees in abundance. They ate to the full and were well nourished, and they reveled in their great goodness. That's just one. There are plenty of places where you can find where Yahweh sustain his people. And a lot of these places, when they're talking about being blessed and Yahweh enriching them and giving them land and things, that olives or olive trees are part of that. We know this even now. You can use it on your skin just to take care of your skin. Lighting. It's using the lamps. Command the Israelites to bring you oil of pressed olives for the light so that the lamps may be kept burning. That's in Exodus 27:20. It's used in the temple and lampstands. It can have spiritual purposes. We know that it was used to coronate kings, to anoint prophets. If you bring a grain offering, or even offerings, if you bring a grain offering baked in the oven, it is to consist of the finest flour, either thick loaves made without yeast and with olive oil, and mixed in with the loaves and without yeast, and brushed with olive oil. That's Leviticus 2 verse 4. In the early morning, or early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. That's in Genesis. We see that it's used in each one of these things, the purposes that it's served. It's not there for any reason. It provides shade. A lot of animals use it. It provides shade. And when you do cut a limb to burn it, I didn't know this, that the heat produced from a olive branch is 2.5 times more than other burning woods. Produces more heat. This I didn't know. The smoke of it, when you burn it, is harmless. Like I learned from experience when we first moved to Louisiana, we had to clear out some land, cutting down trees and all that. You get a good whiff of that smoke, it would choke you out. But here, this, you can breathe in the smoke. And the ashes, after you burn it, you can use to fertilize the soil. I mean, like I said, I didn't even go into all the ramifications, things you could use. You know, I did want to mention this. It's referred to as an ancient tree, and I thought that was interesting. Let's go to the book of Daniel. Book of Daniel. Let me just read a few verses here. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. I'm looking at verse 9, so that's why I said it. Daniel 7 verse 9. 7 verse 9 says, and I was looking until the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days sat, whose robe was white as snow, and hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like flames of fire, and his wheels like burning fire. Who is the Ancient of Days? Verse 13, we're still in chapter 7 of Daniel. Daniel 7 verse 13, I was looking in the night vision, behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of the heavens, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Verse 22, until the Ancient of Days come, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So even it's given a name that we know refers to our Heavenly Father and Messiah. Psalms chapter 90. Psalms chapter 90. Psalms 90, verse 1. I won't read that first line there, but Psalms 90, verse 1. It says, O Yahweh, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were born, or ever you formed the earth in the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are El. He is the one, the Ancient of Days. The one that existed before, and that's why that was part of the discussion we had here between the messages. When we say, as it was in the beginning, what beginning are we talking about? Here, the psalmist is talking about that time that existed before the earth was even formed. Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44. And here Yahweh speaking, and I'll start in verse 2. It says, "So says Yahweh, who made you and formed you from the womb. He helps you. Do not fear my servant Jacob, and you, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. For I will pour water on a thirsty place and floods on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit on your seed and my blessings on your offspring. And they shall sprout as among grass and as willows by streams of water. This one shall say, I belong to Yahweh, and this one will call himself by the name of Jacob. And this one shall write with his hand for Yahweh, and be surnamed by the name of Israel. So says Yahweh, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, Yahweh of hosts, I am the first, and I am the last, and there is no mighty one except me." Once again, referring to his how long he's been around, and we have a physical example here. That tree is also considered to be, set apart. Olive branch, and it's interesting, you think back in Noah, all throughout Scripture, of course, he sent a raven out, brought nothing, but he sent out a dove, and what did the dove bring back? Olive branch. Sign of peace, wisdom, fertility, powder, purity. It's just everything, and when I mean that means, once again, it goes back to prolifics, producing. All these themes come back to it. In Samuel 10:1, it says that Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head, and because we know it's used for coronation kings, I should have read that earlier. On Saul's head, he kissed him, saying, "Has not Yahweh anointed you ruler over his inheritance?" So we know what it's used for. That is an important position, and what he used, he's all up to establish that. 2 Kings 9:3. Then take the flask and pour oil on his head and declare, "This is what Yahweh says: I anoint you king over Israel." All the purposes and what it can do. It's used for anointing priests. And when you think about it, we don't have priests so much, but what are the priests supposed to do? They're supposed to examples. It's used, do it for anointing of as far as people that are witnesses to Yahweh. We to love righteousness and hate wickedness. Therefore, Yahweh, your Elohim, has set you above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. That's from Psalms 45:7. Saul talks about it, and I know I read some of it last week, but let's go back to Romans 11. Romans 11, starting verse 11. Romans 11:11. Romans 11:11. He says, "I say then, did not they stumble that they should fall? Let it not be. But by their slipping away came salvation to the nations to provoke them to jealousy. Now if their slipping away is the riches of the world, and their condemnation the riches of the nations, how much more their restoration?" I mean, that's a powerful statement. That's a whole other message in itself. But you just think about it. If even in their failures they were able to do that, how much more in their victories? How much more in their restoration? Verse 13. "For I speak to you, the nations, since I am an apostle of the nations." And he says, "I glorify my ministry, if somehow I may provoke to jealousy my flesh, and may save some of them. For if their casting away is the reconciliation of the world, what will their restoration be except life from the dead? Now if the first fruit is holy, so also the lump, and if the root is holy, so also the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and became a share of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. But if you do boast, it is not you that bears the root, but the root bears you. You will say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, for unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith or belief. Do not be high-minded, but fear. For if Yahweh did not spare the natural branches, fear that it may be, he will not spare you either. Behold then the kindness and severity of Yahweh on those having fallen. Severity, but on you kindness, if you continue in the kindness. Otherwise you will be cut off. And those also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in. For Yahweh is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut off out of the natural wild olive tree, and against nature were grafted into a good olive tree, how much more these, being according to nature, will be grafted into their own olive tree. For I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers, So that you may not be wise within yourselves, that hardness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the nature comes. And the reason I wanted to mention this again, because I thought that it was interesting when he talks about the olive tree, and one thing we know, the olive tree, they produce fruit. That's why I read that first about how prolific and how generous they are with what they produce and what they generate. And that's what Israel's supposed to. He said, but if you were a wild branch, and I think I mentioned that last time, and you just think about that. He didn't say that they were still an olive tree, weren't they? But they were wild. Wild olive trees don't produce fruit. And if they do, it's nothing you can use. And remember, we talked about last time, if we're to produce fruit, the fruit does not sustain the tree it comes from. The fruit is for others to be sustained and benefit. The shade is for the others to sustain and benefit. Even if you take a branch and burn it, it is for the others. None of it is for that tree, and definitely not for the root that bears it. And so if we are in Messiah, the things that we produce, the fruit we produce is for others. Even when you take that oil and press it and get light, the tree doesn't benefit from that. The olives don't benefit from that. It's for others. You think about everything that Yahweh does and operates through us. It's for others. We are portraying something from Him. It's from Him. So that others benefit and learn. And through that, by us subjecting ourselves to Him, He blesses us and does that. But it's just interesting He uses this. And I thought it was interesting because He did say wild olives. Which brings me to olive trees. Which brings me to when we talk about others and their walk. They may have some kind of form, and Bob reads all the time in Thessalonians. It says what, having some form of knowledge, but never coming to the fullness or the understanding of truth, but never come to the knowledge of truth. So it's adjacent. It's a kind. But the difference is, for those of us that are attached to the Messiah, our walk, it produces fruit. And it produces something that others can benefit from. Because there's a lot out there that are either producing no fruit or producing something, I got you, Robert, or producing something that is not sustaining to those who ingest it. Yes, Robert.
Well, like what you're saying in Matthew 7, it says, even so every good tree brings forth good fruit, but the corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit.
Right.
A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Right.
I thought he was going to, because I was going to mention next, I thought he was about to read it too. Remember it talks about those that are brought and say, didn't we do this in your name? But in doing those things, is that what, because and I don't have to be careful how to say this, but I want to make sure I'm understood. Is that what brings and keeps people with Yahweh? The casting out the demons, the healing, the works and wonders, is that what keeps us with Yahweh? Is that what is needed for those to be in Messiah? Now he did talk about, he said cast out, go into all the world, we read the Great Commission, they shall cast out demons in my name, they won't be hurt by anything. But he said what? Go and teach the good news. He said that these other good works and they will follow them, but he sent them for something very specific. We're to walk in faith and belief and be obedient to Yahweh. Someone that comes, I even looked at the visitors here. They didn't come because we're raising people from the dead. They didn't come because we're performing these great signs and doing all these things and walk, rise and walk. But it's what? We're here to study the Word and we're here to share in the Word unadulterated. Not trying to adulterate it, not trying to mix it and, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, Yeshua said to himself when he was feeding them with the fish and the bread, he's like, you didn't come to hear the word,
right.
You came to eat.
You came to eat, right. Right.
So you want to see the miracles, but you don't want to take in what I got to say to you.
Right. And so that's what it is. Are we willing to enjoy that truth? Because that is that fruit, because that is the nature of Yahweh, that life giving. That's why when we read, that's another thing we discussed during the break. What was Yahshua that said him? He's a life-giving spirit. The things he came and did gave life. So are the actions that we do or the things that we profess, are they life-giving in the same vein as what Yahshua did? Or they're just words? People do nice things all the time. There's a lot of, like I say, good intentioned people. They're doing what we say good works. They travel the world. They, build bridges and dig wells and all that. I'm not against that. Feed the hungry, do all that. Look, I am not against that. But what I'm talking about is the things that can be done that bring people into the family of Yahweh, that provide life. Because you can do that anywhere. There's a lot of people that do that. But remember, what sets us apart, when you talk about being apart, it's also a part in our works, a part in our motivation. Even to what David just said, we were talking about on the way here, you can do the same act, but remember, Yahweh sees the heart, even in our obedience. So are we here today keeping the Sabbath because it's the Sabbath and I got to? Or are we here because we love Yahweh and we want to fellowship with his people? Do we obey Yahweh out of, because we were talking about, we checking off is this kingdom worthy? Is this what is going to get me in the kingdom? Yeah, I guess so. Let me check that off. Let me do it. Let me pad my spot here so I can check off my works for the kingdom. Or we doing it because we're y'all, regardless, I want to do it because I love you. That's what makes the difference. So, and the fruitless and ineffective branches, those are the ones that are cut off. I was reminded what Brother Tom, when Yahshua prayed, he prayed in Gethsemane, and he was absolutely right. It's a place of many olives. That's what the name means. It means olive press. Gethsemane, or oil press. And we know that Yahshua was beaten and crushed for us. And guess what? If we want to be able to produce, a lot of times we'll go through that same thing. To do something of use. It's healthy. You can produce things for health. Those who partake are healed and sustained. It grows a perfect leaf that is used for medical purposes. Isaiah 1:6, from the sole of your feet to the top of your head, there is no soundness, only wounds and welts and open sores, not cleansed or bandaged or soothed with olive oil. And of course, in Luke 10, we think about the Good Samaritan. He went and bandaged him with wounds, pouring oil and wine, and then he put the man in his own donkey and brought him into the inn and took care of him. When that outside, then no, it's one of the hardest woods. It's at least twice as strong as oak. In the temple of Solomon, the angels of the ark were made of wood and of olive of the tree and covered with gold. And the interior doors of the sanctuary were also made of olive wood. For the inner sanctuary, he made a pair of angels out of olive wood, and each 10 cubits high. That was 1 Kings 6:23. It's solid, durable. You can't, like I say, you can't destroy it, and it's stronger than most others. It's wind-blown pollination. I mentioned that last time. Not by animal. Just like we receive the spirit that can be seen. Yahshua says the spirit. The wind blows and we don't know where it goes. The spirit is brought to us. It's breathed upon us through Messiah Yahshua. I thought it was interesting. We still talk about the wild and the cultivated tree. The cultivated tree, the good olive tree, produces a flower that's called a perfect flower. I thought that was interesting. A perfect flower. And it's capable of developing, because that's what you need in order to make fruit. But if it's not a perfect flower, it only has one, then it doesn't. It can't make fruit. Genesis 17. Genesis 17. And when I read that, I instantly thought about what Yahshua said. Remember, he told the young man, you do all these things. He says, I'll do it. I've done all these things. And so what did Yahshua say? But if you would be perfect, then he gave him a second part, didn't he? I will actually read that, but I didn't realize the scripture talked about these things. Genesis 17, verse 1, what makes us perfect in Messiah? And Abraham was 99 years old, and Yahweh appeared to him and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be perfect. How? Deuteronomy 18. A lot of these are just 1 or 2 verses. Deuteronomy 18. Deuteronomy 18 says, you will be made perfect in Yahweh your Elohim if you do what? Well, let's go to verse 12 first, because he's talking about getting rid of all these things out of the land. Deuteronomy 18 verse 12 says, for all doing these things are an abomination to Yahweh, and that's, getting into magic, getting the dead, being a divination, all these things, killing your kids, to these gods. Verse 12, he says, do all these things, abomination to Yahweh, and because of these acts, Yahweh is expelling these nations before you. He says, but you be perfect with Yahweh, your Elohim. Because they obey his law. Deuteronomy 34. Deuteronomy 34. That's not it. I have to come back to it. But I do want to go to Psalms. I have to come back to Deuteronomy 34 in a second. Psalms 19. Psalms 19. Psalms 19, starting in verse 1, it says, the heavens are recording the majesty of Yahweh, and the works of his hands expanse is manifested. Day by day they pour forth speech, and night to night reveal knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words where their voice is not heard. Their measuring line has gone out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And them he has set up a tent for the sun. He comes forth like a bridegroom from his canopy, and he rejoices like a hero to run a race. His going forth from the end of the heavens, and his orbit to the ends, and nothing is hidden from his heat. The law of Yahweh is perfect, converting the soul, and the testament of Yahweh is sure, making the simple wise. We have a song that we sing with that. The precepts of Yahweh are right, rejoice in the heart, and the commandments of Yahweh are clear, giving light to the eyes. And the fear of Yahweh is clean, enduring forever. And the judgments of Yahweh are true, and they are righteous altogether. They are more precious than gold, even much fine gold, and sweeter than the honey and the drops from the honeycomb. So we know that the word of Yahweh brings perfection. Matthew 5. Matthew 5. Matthew 5. Matthew 5, verse 44, by the context, Matthew 5:44, Yahshua speaking, he says, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those cursing you. Do well to those hating you. Pray for those who take you by force and persecute you, so that you may become sons or children of your Father in heaven, because he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and unjust. And if you love those loving you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you only greet your brothers, what exceptional thing do you do? Do not tax collectors do also? Therefore you become perfect in its completeness, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Let's stay in Matthew. I believe it's Matthew 19. Yeah, Matthew 19. Matthew 19, I'm starting in verse 17, because when they call him, they said, what good thing do I do that I may enter eternal life? And he called him good master, good teacher. So in verse 17, Yeshua said, why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Yahweh. But if you desire to enter into life, keep the commandments. Obedience. Obeying his word. He said to him, which? And Yeshua said, you shall not commit murder, nor commit adultery, nor steal, nor give false witness. Honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, all these I have kept from my youth. What do I lack? And then Yeshua said to him, if you desire to be perfect, go and sell your property and give to the poor, and you have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. Be attached to him. John 17. John 17, and this is in a prayer, we read this during even Passover. This is in the prayer Yeshua gave. John 17, and we referenced this even in the first message when Bob was reading. Verse 17, John 17, and let's pick it up in 20. Yeshua was praying. He said, I do not pray concerning these only, but also concerning those who will believe in me through their word, that all may be echad, meaning one. May all be one, or echad, as you are in me, Father, and I in you, that they also may be echad in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And I've given them glory which you have given me, or the esteem that you have given me, and they may be echad as we are echad. And I in them, and you in me, that they may be perfected in one. And that the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you loved me. Second Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, chapter 4. And like I said, these are just a couple of things as far as, you know, when I was reading these characteristics and in relation to the tree and how they are refer back to Messiah and our relationship with him. And in 2 Corinthians, what did I say, 4? Why am I in chapter 10? 2 Corinthians 4. And let's start in verse 6. We're getting it in here, and I just want to, you know, like I said, there's nothing, and it's especially interesting when we talk about the oil. It can't be produced without being pressed, without being crushed. And you know what? I've shared this with brother before. I get on the conference call most Sabbaths, and some of them get on like, man, it's been a rough week, and you know, and I understand it. Some of us here probably had rough weeks. But what I told them, and I say that to all of us here, including myself, and I remind myself of this, when we go through these things, when we say, man, it's been a rough, hard week, or we say, well, I had plenty of opportunity to exhibit Yahweh's character this week. I had plenty of opportunity to obey Yahweh this week. Because remember, everything here is talking about our proving, you know, and I've shared this before, you know, when I used to give tests to my students, I quit calling it a test. You know, no one wants to be tested and tried. No one wants to go through trial. That sounds harsh. But Yahweh, you know, he speaks plainly. He says, look, you will go through that. But I think about, you know, my students, until they get used to me, I kind of treat them with kid gloves at first. So instead, I'd give them a paper, and at the top it would say opportunity. And they were like, opportunity? What is that? And I'm like, yeah, this opportunity for you to show me everything you know. Everything you learn. You know. Or I would call it an exhibit time, or a skills exhibit. And they're like, what? I'm saying, you're going to exhibit for me all your skills that you possess. And so we can look at it that when we look at this, being able to produce that likeness and to show those around us that likeness and that character of Messiah, look at it like that. You don't want to be tried or persecuted. Look at this is the time for us to exhibit what we've learned. An opportunity for us to show what we've learned, an opportunity to put to use the things we've been reading, the things we've been praying for, because don't we pray, Yahweh, give me strength. Yahweh, give me discernment. Yahweh, show me what you want me to do. So he gives it to us, and now he says, now show it. So let's look at it like that. And by that, we're producing that, and when people see that, once again, it produces that fruit. It may be producing, they liken the oil to the spirit. It produces that which can be used to heal them. When Tony and them were, I got to Tina, when Tony and them were speaking during the break, and they mentioned something about the trees and for the healing of the nations, I thought about that. We look at things, and when I was looking at this about this tree, I'm gonna have to rethink what was that tree of life. When we think about Revelation, I'm starting to rethink now when it says that the tree and the nations and the leaves were used for the healing of the nations. These grow on branches. If we are grafted in, if we are of that, and we're attached to the root, how can that be? Because can people, and this is not interpreting prophecy, don't take it at that. I'm looking even now, but can people, how many times have you been around people and you prayed with them, or they ask you a question because they know you believe something, and they sense the Spirit of Yahweh within you, and you talk to them, you comfort them, you give them that word, it heals their soul. It brings them peace. It comforts. It made me rethink about that and about all these things. And like I said, when we're faced with things, it's an opportunity for us to show what we believe. It's an opportunity for us to reflect and to show Messiah, to show who we follow, who and what we believe in. Tina, I hope you didn't forget.
I was also going to add to what you were saying, also like offering your very best.
Yes.
Whenever you do that, you're offering your very best the same way that Yahweh has done for us.
The very best. Because what's the purest, what's the best oil from the olive? That first press, right? The most productive. And so when we are faced with something, when we get our first press, how do we react? When the people around us are watching. We always like to talk about the world. We'll say, well, Christianity or the world out there and what they need to do. But what about what we need to do? What about when we're faced with something and our neighbors, our co-workers, and people are watching, and if our first reaction is the Spirit of Yahweh, because that's what made Yeshua, everything he did the first round through, he didn't have to come through second, third round. His first round through, his reaction, his words, his everything was spot on, it was perfect. And that's what made it so effective and life-giving. I'm ashamed to tell you how many times I stumbled out the gate and be like, man, I wish I had a redo on that.
Yeah. Time machine.
Yes. Examples for my children, for my wife, for people around me, like I did not handle that well. But praise Yahweh, he's merciful. He's given me other opportunities to exhibit skills. But that's what he does. Tom, were you about to say something?
I was going to say that this pressing of the olive in Gethsemane, in Luke 22, I just remembered this, and this is a medical condition that I've known of a couple of people that were praying so fervently and under stress. When they were sweating and straining, it would literally break the blood corpuscles in the forehead, and blood would emerge. And we read here in Luke 22, it says here that in verse 44 of Luke 22, this is Messiah Yahshua, and being in an agony, this is for us.
Right. He
prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great. Here's the squeeze, like the olive press, of drops of blood falling down to the ground. Straining so hard for all of us before our Heavenly Father. Right.
And that happens, you're absolutely right. People, it's been documented, people under stress, torture victims and all that, they have been known, their pores open up so much, they're not cut, but that pressure, it's like sweat and blood.
The strength causes a hemorrhaging.
Yeah.
The blood comes forth out of the body.
It does.
If you'll do a study, there's 7 different bleedings of Messiah I run across in the scripture between here and Father, I commit my spirit unto you when he was dying on the torture stake. And Golgotha on the Mount of Olives. 7 different, I think there's another one, a set of 7 there that convey what our elder brother's gone through
Right.
on our behalf.
There's so much that we can learn from. Psalms 129. Thank you, Tom. And once again, that's something for someone else to study, even someone that's listening here. You know, Tom mentioned about the 7 bleedings of Messiah to look into. We can learn from. He puts these things here for us to look into and to learn from, to draw closer to him. Psalms 129. I thought it was interesting, so we just mentioned that here. 129:1. He says, "Many times they have distressed me from my youth. Let Israel now say, they have distressed me from my youth many times, yet they have not prevailed over me. The plowers plowed my back, and they made their furrows long. Yahweh is righteous, he cuts the cords of the wicked. Let them be ashamed and turn back, all those who hate Zion." And I didn't read that in 2 Corinthians 4, did I? I just turned there and they turned away. So now let's go to 2 Corinthians 4. Maybe it's for me to read out of order, because when I read that, it made me think about this. 2 Corinthians 4. And let's start in verse 6, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6. It says, "Because it is Yahweh who said, out of darkness light shall shine." And that's how it should be out of our darkest times, that the light of Yahweh shines through us and from us. "Who shone in our hearts and give the brightness of the knowledge of the majesty, or the honor, or the esteem, of Yahweh in the face of Yahshua Messiah. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the excellence of the power may be of Yahweh and not from us. In every way being troubled, not being overwhelmed, being harassed on all sides but not conquered, being persecuted but not being forsaken, being thrown down but not having been destroyed. For we always bear about in our bodies about the death of the Master Yeshua, that also the life of Yeshua may be made manifest in our body through us." We can exemplify him. In Isaiah 40. That's another song that we sing a lot. Isaiah 40. Isaiah 40, verse 28. Isaiah 40, verse 28 says, "Have you not known? Have you not heard? Yahweh, the everlasting one, or sovereign, the creator of the ends of the earth, he is not faint, nor does he grow weary. There is no searching to his understanding. He gives power to the faint. To him with no vigor he increases might. Even youth are faint and fatigued, and young men stumbling shall stumble. But the one waiting for Yahweh shall renew their strength. They shall go up with wings as the eagles, and they shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint." We are strengthened. Thank you, David. We are strengthened and improved through him. And so, like I said, you know, I talked about this briefly a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to kind of go back and look through it. And it's just so, I guess it's just interesting and edifying. You go back and look at the characteristics, and like I said, I'm sure you can find more. But once again, their longevity, they live forever. Well, not literally forever, but they live a long time. But we know Yahweh lives forever as represented for him, prolific, you know, and they produce much and produce much offspring. Like, and we read the verses with Yeshua, indestructible. They're incorruptible and indestructible. And I say even fire, which is different for plants, you know, they're resilient, self-sustaining. That it sustains everything else, but it doesn't need us to sustain it. And just like Messiah, he only is sustained by Yahweh. It's generous. It's ancient. It's set apart. As he is. It can be used for good health. It's one of the hardest woods. And when I say that, we look at it as strength. And how the flowers are wind blown, just like the spirit. The word of Yahweh, it cannot be understood. It cannot take root without the spirit of Yahweh dwelling within us. Yes, Keno.
I don't remember. Did you read Isaiah 61?
I did not. You can go ahead, read it. Isaiah 61 what?
It says, verse 3, it says, starting from verse 1, he was saying about the Holy Spirit is in me. This was the year of the massive favor. But if you go down to verse 3, it says, to provide for those to mourn in Zion, to give them a garden for ashes, and the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, that plant the planting of Yahweh, that might be glorified.
Right.
And we sung the song.
Yeah, that's why I picked that song.
Oh, okay.
I know my wife really killed me for singing that song, but that's why I picked it. And so no, I didn't put it in with my verses. But yes, you know, all those things relate.
Is that what he's
Yes.
the olive tree again, right?
Yeah.
Characteristic of the olive tree.
Right. So it's just
That was so important that's the first sermon that Joshua gave in the synagogue, the little synagogue in Nazareth. He stood up and rolled up the scroll from that first portion
Yes.
and read this beautiful exchange. I'll take your ashes and I will give you beauty and all that. All these different
Right.
exchanges and what he took upon himself. So we have all those blessings that are spoken of there in Isaiah 61.
right. Because from that, remember I said the ashes when you burn it can be used to fertilize the soil. Would it be that fertile soil, right? But we see, I mean, there's so many. We can look at everything. The family. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just gonna say, what I got out of this is, I didn't even think about the whole earth got flooded, and the tree that actually survived or ended up on back was the olive.
Yeah.
So out of all the other trees, the olive tree had the furthest roots to stay solid in its foundation. So
Right.
when the water subsides, fast forward to now, you know, evil is a flood over this entire earth.
Right.
So if we are grafted in, we will sustain through this flood
Right.
of being a part of the olive tree.
Right.
So when the flood goes away, we will still remain.
And that's
Exactly.
remaining.
And then if we think even further, if
Mhm.
the earth is meant to be burned till there's nothing left, if the olive tree can sustain burning,
Yep.
if we're part of that tree, then we will resurrect
Grafted in.
that.
Hallelujah.
It's not destroyed. Yes.
Very interesting.
Tom.
The world's leading pediatric cardiologist, Dr. Stephen Gundry, said of all things that ever research vitamin E, ubiquinol, and COQ10, and all that, is a form of olive oil he found that grows in Morocco. And it's so dry and so tough on that plant, it produces 30 times greater polyphenols, which are these compounds that have a super protective effect of preventing heart disease and stroke from the olive oil that they sell. It's a little expensive, but you
Right.
can take a tablespoon or two a day or 2 or 3 times a week.
Right.
30 times more potent than other olive oil, but it's under extremely harsh conditions that it
Right.
has to grow. So
Right.
there's stress that produces something, even
Right.
in the plant, that produces a phenomenal benefit for health.
Right. Because how can Yahweh shine more when it seems even more so as during those times? That's when His greatness is shown. Like I said, when things are good, you know, people kind of, but that really His greatness is shown through this harsh times, the times of trial. There's just, and like I said, that's just one aspect. Yahweh uses so many things, you know, and He uses the family, and He uses just everything He used for our example, for our admonition, and for our instruction, so we can grow closer to Him. Thanks for your participation. I'm looking. I brought my phone up here so I can see if anyone made any comments, but I don't see any here. And I'll check back. Maybe some will be made later when people watch it later. And like I said, this is a family. So if there's a question or comment, we'll get to it. Maybe a couple of days, but we'll get back to it. But if there's nothing else, that's it. Praise Yahweh. We'll be back. Oh, Curtis.
Actually, you reminded me of a couple of scriptures talking about the olive trees, particularly how tough they are,
Mm-hmm.
how they don't die. But the passage reminded me of parallel passage. One out of Zechariah 4, and the other one out of Revelation 11.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
Zechariah 4. Pick it up in verse 11. And answered to them, what are these 2 olive trees? Zechariah talking to his
Right.
I answered and said, well, what are these two olive trees? One is the right lampstand and the other one had its side. Remember that, the lampstand. And I further answered and said to him, and what are these two olive branches that drip into the receptacles of the golden pipes, which come from the golden olive drain?
Mm-hmm.
And then he answered me and he said, don't you know what these are? And I said, no, my master, I don't. He said, well, these are the 2 anointed ones.
Right.
Witnesses.
These are the 2 anointed ones
Let's stand by them.
who stand by
Master
the
of the Lord.
Yahweh of the whole earth.
Mhm.
They're symbolized by the cherubim on either side of the ark.
Right.
Now, let's fast forward to Revelation 11, please.
Revelation 11.
There you go.
Revelation 11,
That's fine.
1 through 6.
Go ahead.
Talks about what the powers they have to do, these people have to do. Verse 7, then they finish their testimony. The beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war with them, overcome them, and kill them. Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where our master was also crucified. Guess where that is? Then those from the people from the earth, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and they will not allow their dead bodies to be put in the grave. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and send gifts to one another. Because these 2 prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. Why are they being tormented? Because of their rebellion,
Right.
witchcraft, sorcery, all sorts of details given in other places. Verse 11. Now after 3.5 days, the breath of life from Elohim entered them, and they stood on their feet. And great fear fell on those who saw.
Right.
And then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, come up here. They ascended into heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them.
Right.
In the same hour, there was a great earthquake, and a tenth of the city fell. And the earthquake, 7,000 people were killed. And the rest that were afraid and gave glory to the Elohim of heaven. Well, it's a little late for that now, because show how fickle they are, aren't they? The second will quickly pass. Behold, the third will come quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a resurrection life picture. The 2 witnesses, this olive tree.
As olive trees.
All fits, hallelujah.
Right. Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah,
And he-
that's spot on.
And remember what you said about the olive oil correlated to the blood?
Right.
It's here.
Exactly.
It's all a perfect fit.
Yes. There's a lot there. So, I look forward to hearing